I saw a random girl I didn't know about to take her life, so I broke the rules to save her. But when I called her foster dad to tell him, he called it drama and said, "Why are you disturbing me on my holiday?" That was 4 months ago. Fast forward to now. I made him regret everything and more. I was a delivery driver just trying to finish my deliveries. When I looked up and through the second-story window, I saw a girl about to commit suicide. She was a teenage girl, and she was standing on a chair, completely still, tying something to the ceiling. Her face was blank, like she wasn't even really there. Before my brain could even process what I was seeing, she kicked the chair away. I dropped the package immediately. I pounded on the locked door and yelled, "Hey, open up!" But I got nothing. I didn't even think. I just bolted around the side of the house, found a window, and punched through it with my elbow. Glass shattered everywhere, wounding my arm, but I didn't feel it yet. Adrenaline took over as I climbed inside. I ran up the stairs, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. I burst into the room, and there she was, barely conscious. I grabbed her and lifted her up with all my strength, trying to stop her from choking. My hands shook like crazy as I worked the knot loose, and finally got her down. She gasped and coughed, her eyes wide with shock. We just stared at each other for a few seconds, both shaking and breathing hard. I pulled out my phone to call 911. "Who are you?" she whispered, barely audible. The ambulance showed up quickly, and they took her straight to the hospital. The police came and asked me a bunch of questions, and I ended up at the hospital too to get stitches. My supervisor called me, yelling about the broken window, damaged package, and how I might lose my job. But honestly, none of that mattered. I couldn't stop replaying that moment when I looked up at the window. At the hospital, the doctor stitched up my arm. She was gentle and calm, which helped because I was still shaking pretty badly. Even after I got home, I was shaking. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't talk about it with my wife or my kids. The whole thing just ate away at me. I needed answers. So the next day, I called the hospital and asked for the girl's emergency contact info. After some hesitation, the nurse gave me a phone number. Apparently, the girl's foster parents were out of town. A man answered when I called the number, sounding irritated right away. When I explained who I was and what happened, his voice was cold, and what he said shocked me to my core. "Oh, okay, but you just said she's alive? So if she's not actually dead, why are you calling me and disturbing me on my holiday?" I went pale. I tried to explain again, but he just snapped, "Look, we've got 8 foster kids here. You think we care about every little drama? We feed them, we get the checks. Ellie keeps to herself. Not our problem if she's unstable." I clenched the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "She tried to take her life," I said slowly, hoping he'd realize how serious this was. "And you stopped her. Congrats," he said flatly, then hung up. I just stood there staring at the wall, feeling completely hollow. I had never heard someone talk about a kid like that. It explained everything. The lifeless expression on her face, the emptiness in that huge house. No one had cared enough to notice she was hurting. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't get her out of my head. The nurse actually called me at some point to tell me Ellie had asked about me. She said she remembered the way I looked at her when I found her, like someone actually cared. Hearing that made something inside me shift. It made me want to show up again. About 2 weeks later, an address close to hers showed up on my delivery list again. It wasn't her house, but it was close enough to where I could knock on her door and pretend I'd made a mistake, and so I did. When I knocked, Ellie opened the door. She looked just as sad as ever, but she saw me and recognized me right away. "You're the package guy," she said softly. "Yeah, that's me," I replied, awkwardly mumbling something about getting the wrong address. I was going to just walk away, unsure of what to do. But then she asked me, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't looked up?" I froze. I went to respond, but before I could, a woman appeared behind her in the doorway. I realized it was the foster mother. Her face changed when she saw me. "You," she said coldly. I nodded politely, but she stepped forward, blocking Ellie. "I didn't expect you to show up again. Because of you, we had to spend money to put her in therapy. We don't need any more of your interference." "I was just delivering something," I said, trying to stay calm. "Well, you did more than that. You cost us money," she said sharply. "And don't pretend you're some hero. You're not her guardian angel. You're just a delivery guy who happened to look up." I didn't respond. I glanced behind her at Ellie, who was quietly watching everything. Her eyes met mine, and she gave me this scared, shy look, almost as if she was begging me for help. In that moment, I knew I couldn't just walk away and forget about her. Something was seriously wrong in that house, and Ellie needed someone on her side. As I walked back to my van, I made a decision. I wasn't going to abandon this girl to these monsters who only saw her as a paycheck. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew I had to do something. This was just the beginning. I got back to my van and sat there for a while, just staring at the steering wheel. My arm throbbed where the stitches were, a physical reminder of what had happened. I couldn't shake the image of Ellie's face, that silent plea for help. The foster mom's words kept echoing in my head too. "You cost us money." Not, "You saved our daughter," or "Thank you," just, "You cost us money." Who thinks like that about a kid? I finished my route on autopilot, dropping off packages without really seeing the houses or the people. When I got home that night, I tried to act normal for my family. My wife Karen noticed something was off though. She's always been good at reading me. "You're still thinking about that girl, aren't you?" she asked after the kids went to bed. I nodded, not sure how to explain the mess of feelings inside me. Karen sat down next to me on the couch and took my hand. I told her about going to Ellie's house, about the foster mom's reaction. Karen's face got more concerned concerned with every word. "These people sound horrible," she said. "Have you thought about calling CPS?" I hadn't, actually. It seemed so obvious now that she mentioned it. The next morning, I called Child Protective Services and reported what I'd seen and heard. The woman on the phone took all my information and said they'd look into it. She sounded tired, like she'd heard 1,000 stories like mine. I wasn't sure if anything would come of it, but at least I'd done something. A few days went by. I kept an eye out for Ellie's address on my delivery routes, but it never came up. I thought about driving by her house on my own time, but wasn't sure if that would make things worse. I didn't want to get her in trouble with her foster parents. Then, about a week after I made the CPS report, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Ellie. The nurse gave me your number. Can we talk?" I stared at my phone for a good minute, surprised. I hadn't expected her to reach out. I texted back that yes, we could talk, and asked if she was okay. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, a response came through. "Not really. CPS came by yesterday. Foster parents are furious. Said I'm causing problems." My stomach dropped. I hadn't thought about how the foster parents would react to a CPS visit. Of course they'd blame Ellie. I asked if she was safe, and she said she was for now, but things were tense. We texted back and forth for a bit. She told me she was 16, had been in foster care since she was 12, and had been with this family for about a year. They had 7 other foster kids, all younger than her. The parents, the Millers, were nice when social workers were around, but completely different when they were alone. "They're just in it for the money," she texted. "They spend as little as possible on us, and pocket the rest." I wasn't surprised, given what I'd heard from the foster dad on the phone. Ellie said the Millers were especially mad about the therapy sessions they'd been forced to arrange after her escicide attempt. Apparently, they were worried the therapist would figure out what was going on and report them. Over the next few weeks, Ellie and I kept texting. I was careful not to cross any lines. I was just trying to be a supportive adult in her life, someone she could talk to. Karen knew about it and supported me. She even suggested inviting Ellie over for dinner sometime, but I wasn't sure how to make that happen without the Millers finding out. One day, about a month after the incident, I was delivering in Ellie's neighborhood again. I texted her to let her know I'd be nearby, and she asked if I could meet her at a park a few blocks from her house. She said she was allowed to go there after school. I finished my deliveries and headed to the park. It was a small neighborhood place with a playground and some benches. Ellie was sitting on one of the swings, looking even thinner than before. When she saw me, she gave a small wave. I sat on the swing next to her, feeling awkwardly large on the kid-sized equipment. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. Up close, I could see a faint bruise on her cheek, partially covered with makeup. "What happened to your face?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She touched her cheek self-consciously. "Mrs. Miller got mad when I was late coming home from school yesterday. I felt a surge of anger, but tried not to show it." "Has she hit you before?" Ellie shrugged. "Not usually. She's more into other stuff, locking us in our rooms, withholding food, that kind of thing." My blood boiled hearing her talk about Absi so casually, like it was just a normal part of life. "Ellie, you know that's not okay, right? None of that is normal." "I know," she said, "but CPS didn't do anything. They never do. The Millers know exactly what to say, how to make everything look perfect when officials visit." She told me more about life in the Miller house, how the foster kids were basically treated like servants, how the Millers would put on a big show whenever social workers came by, with home-cooked meals and family game nights that never happened otherwise, how they threatened the kids to keep them quiet. "The little ones are too scared to say anything," Ellie explained, "and they don't really understand that it's not normal. I try to look out for them, but..." She trailed off, looking down at her worn sneakers. I could see the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She was just a kid herself, trying to protect even younger kids in an impossible situation. "What about your therapist?" I asked. "Can you tell them what's going on?" Ellie shook her head. "Mrs. Miller sits in on all my sessions, says it's to support me, but really it's to make sure I don't say anything." We talked for about an hour. By the end, I felt even more certain that I needed to help somehow. I gave Ellie my personal email address, telling her to use it if she ever couldn't text me for some reason. As she got up to leave, she hesitated, then gave me a quick, awkward hug. "Thanks for not forgetting about me," she said, then hurried off toward her house. That night, I talked everything over with Karen. She was as disturbed as I was by what Ellie had told me. We discussed options, calling CPS again, trying to find Ellie's social worker directly, even looking into becoming foster parents ourselves. None of the options seemed perfect, but we agreed we had to do something. The next day, I called CPS again and spoke to a different person. I explained the situation in more detail, including the bruise I'd seen on Ellie's face. The worker sounded more concerned this time and promised they would investigate further. I wasn't holding my breath, given what Ellie had said about the Millers' ability to fool officials, but it was worth trying. A few days later, I got an email from Ellie. The subject line was just "help" in all caps. My heart raced as I opened it. "They took my phone. They know I've been talking to you. Mr. Miller is really mad. Said I'm ungrateful and making up lies. They're sending me away to some special group home for troubled teens. Please help. I'm scared." I showed the email to Karen immediately. She read it with wide eyes, then looked up at me. "We need to do something now," she said firmly. "This sounds serious." I agreed. We decided I would go to the house right away while Karen called CPS again to report the escalation. I drove to the Miller's house, my heart pounding the whole way. When I got there, I saw a car in the driveway being loaded with luggage. Mr. Miller was putting a suitcase in the trunk, while Mrs. Miller stood nearby, checking something on her phone. Ellie was nowhere in sight. I parked across the street and walked over, trying to look casual. Mr. Miller spotted me, and his face darkened. He was a tall man with an expensive haircut and the kind of tan that comes from regular vacations, not honest work. "What are you doing here?" he demanded as I approached. "Haven't you caused enough trouble?" "I'm just checking on Ellie," I said, keeping my voice level. "I heard you're sending her away." Mrs. Miller stepped forward, her elevated heels clicking on the driveway. "That's none of your business. Ellie needs specialized care that we can't provide. We're doing what's best for her." "By sending her to a place for troubled teens?" I asked skeptically. "Those places have a pretty bad reputation." Mr. Miller's face flushed with anger. "Look, delivery man, you need to back off. You have no idea what it's like dealing with these kids. Ellie is manipulative and attention-seeking. She's been lying to you." I noticed movement in an upstairs window, a small face peering out, one of the younger foster kids, watching the confrontation. It reminded me that Ellie wasn't the only one suffering in this house. "Where is Ellie now?" I asked, ignoring his attempt to paint her as the problem. "Inside, packing," Mrs. Miller said curtly. "We're leaving in an hour. The facility is expecting her today." I needed to stall them somehow, give CPS time to respond to Karen's call. "Can I at least say goodbye to her? She texted me that she was scared. She doesn't have her phone anymore," Mr. Miller said with a smirk. "And no, you can't see her. You're not family. You're not her guardian. You're nothing to her." That stung, but I knew he was just trying to get rid of me. I stood my ground. "I'm the person who saved her life. I think that counts for something." Mrs. Miller rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. She wasn't really going to do it. It was just another cry for attention. You fell for it and now you think you're her savior." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people were truly heartless. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Ellie came out, dragging a small suitcase. Her eyes widened when she saw me. There was another bruise on her arm, fresher than the one on her face. "James?" she said, using my name for the first time. "What are you doing here?" Mr. Miller stepped between us. "He was just leaving," he said firmly, giving me a warning look. Ellie tried to move around him, but Mrs. Miller grabbed her arm, right on the bruise, making her wince. "Get in the car, Ellie. Now." I needed to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I couldn't physically stop them from taking her. That would be kidnapping. But I couldn't just let them send her away either. I locked eyes with Ellie, trying to communicate that I wasn't abandoning her. "Ellie, do you want to go to this place?" I asked directly. Before she could answer, Mr. Miller stepped right into my personal space. "That's enough. Leave now, or I'm calling the police." Just then, another car pulled into the street, a county vehicle with the CPS logo on the door. Relief flooded through me. Karen had come through. The Millers noticed it too, their expressions changing from anger to practiced pleasantness in an instant. It was disturbing to watch. A woman got out of the car carrying a folder. She introduced herself as Ms. Jordan from Child Protective Services. The Millers immediately started explaining that they were just taking Ellie to a specialized treatment center, presenting it as a caring decision. Ms. Jordan listened politely, then asked to speak with Ellie alone. The Millers objected, but Ms. Jordan was firm. "It's standard procedure," she said, in a tone that suggested she wouldn't be swayed. They went inside, leaving me standing awkwardly with the Millers in the driveway. Mr. Miller glared at me the whole time. After about 20 minutes, Ms. Jordan came back out with Ellie. She asked to see the paperwork for the facility where they were planning to send Ellie. Mrs. Miller fumbled through her purse and produced some documents. Ms. Jordan reviewed them carefully, then frowned. "This facility isn't approved by our department. It's not even licensed in this state." The Millers started making excuses, talking over each other about how highly recommended the place was. Ms. Jordan cut them off. "I'm going to need to put a hold on this transfer until we can properly review it. In the meantime, I'd like to interview the other children in the home." Mrs. Miller's pleasant mask slipped for a second. "They're at school," she said quickly. "All of them?" Ms. Jordan asked, checking her watch. "It's nearly 4 p.m. Mr. Miller jumped in. "After-school activities. Very busy kids." Ms. Jordan didn't look convinced. She asked to see the children's rooms, and the Millers reluctantly led her back inside. Ellie stayed outside, moving to stand near me. "Thank you," she whispered. "They were going to send me to some place in Utah. I looked it up online. It's horrible. Kids have died there." My stomach turned. "How did you email me if they took your phone?" "Library computer at school," she explained. "I was afraid they'd check my browser history at home." We waited anxiously as Ms. Jordan inspected the house. When they came back out, her professional demeanor had hardened. "I'm going to need to speak with all the children," she said firmly. "I'll be back tomorrow with a court order if necessary." The Millers protested, but Ms. Jordan stood her ground. She told them Ellie wouldn't be going anywhere until a proper investigation was completed. Then she asked Ellie if she had somewhere safe she could stay for the night. Ellie looked at me uncertainly. I cleared my throat. "My wife and I would be happy to have her stay with us temporarily," I offered. "We have kids of our own, plenty of space." Ms. Jordan considered this, then nodded. "That might be best for tonight until we sort this out. I'll need to call your wife to confirm and get your address." The Millers were furious, but couldn't do much with a CPS worker present. Ms. Jordan called Karen, who immediately agreed to the arrangement. Ellie went back inside to get her things, while Ms. Jordan filled out some temporary paperwork. The Millers kept shooting me venomous looks. When Ellie came back out with her small suitcase, Mrs. Miller suddenly grabbed her arm again. "Remember what we talked about," she hissed, just loud enough for me to hear. "Nobody will believe you. Nobody wants a troubled teen." Ms. Jordan stepped in immediately. "That's enough, Mrs. Miller. Please let go of Ellie." The drive home with Ellie was quiet at first. She stared out the window, clutching her suitcase on her lap like she was afraid someone would take it. I tried to make casual conversation, telling her about my kids and how Karen was excited to meet her. Slowly, she started to relax a little. "Do you think they'll let me stay somewhere else permanently?" she asked as we neared my house. "I don't want to go back there." I don't know, I answered honestly, but we're going to do everything we can to help you. You're not alone in this anymore. When we got home, Karen was waiting at the door. She welcomed Ellie warmly, showing her to our guest room and offering her something to eat. My kids, Alex and Lily, were curious about our visitor, but politely gave her space. Over dinner, Ellie gradually opened up more, even smiling a little at Lily's jokes. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Ellie showed us some photos on an old iPod she had hidden in her suitcase. They showed the conditions in the Miller's house when social workers weren't around. Sparse bedrooms with multiple bunk beds, empty refrigerators, locks on the outside of doors. She also had screenshots of text messages from the Millers, threatening the kids if they talked to authorities. I've been collecting evidence, she explained. I was going to show someone eventually, but I was scared. The Millers told us no one would believe us over them. Karen and I exchanged looks. This was more than neglect. It was systematic abuse. We promised Ellie we'd help her get this information to Ms. Jordan. The next day, Ms. Jordan came to our house to interview Ellie properly. Ellie showed her all the evidence she'd collected. Ms. Jordan took it very seriously, taking copies of everything and making detailed notes. She told us she'd already visited the Miller's house again that morning and had managed to speak with some of the younger children. Their stories matched Ellie's. We're removing all the children from the home pending a full investigation, Ms. Jordan informed us. The evidence Ellie provided is extremely helpful. It's rare to have such thorough documentation. Ellie looked both relieved and worried. What about the little ones? Where will they go? We're working on appropriate placements, Ms. Jordan assured her. Emergency foster homes for now, then hopefully more permanent situations. Over the next several weeks, our house became a kind of headquarters for the case. Ms. Jordan visited regularly with updates. The investigation into the Millers was expanding as authorities discovered they'd been fostering children for years, potentially mistreating dozens of kids while collecting government checks. Other former foster children were coming forward with similar stories. Ellie stayed with us during this time. Karen and I had discussed it and decided to apply to become her foster parents. We talked to Ellie about it first, of course, and she was cautiously excited about the idea. The process wouldn't be quick or easy, but Ms. Jordan was supportive and promised to help navigate the system. About a month after Ellie came to stay with us, I was at work when I got an urgent call from Karen. The Millers had shown up at our house, demanding to see Ellie. Karen had refused to let them in and called the police, but they were making a scene in our front yard. I rushed home, my heart racing. When I pulled up to our house, there was a police car already in the driveway. The Millers were arguing with an officer while Karen stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. I parked and hurried over. "There he is," Mr. Miller shouted when he saw me. "That's the man who's been stalking our foster daughter." The officer turned to me with a questioning look. I identified myself and explained the situation as calmly as I could. Karen backed me up, showing the officer the temporary custody paperwork Ms. Jordan had provided. Mrs. Miller was putting on quite a performance, crying and claiming they were just worried about Ellie's well-being. "We love her like our own daughter," she sobbed. "We just want her to get the help she needs." The officer seemed unsure who to believe until Ellie herself came outside. She stood tall despite her obvious fear and addressed the officer directly. "They're lying," she said clearly. "They were going to send me to an abusive facility to get rid of me. They hurt me and the other kids. CPS has all the evidence." She pulled up her sleeve to show the bruise on her arm, now yellowing but still visible. "Mrs. Miller did this when she grabbed me. It's not the first time." The officer's demeanor changed immediately. He asked the Millers to step back and called for backup. While we waited, he took statements from all of us, including Ellie. I could see the Millers getting more agitated as Ellie calmly described their abuse. When the second police car arrived, the officer conferred with his colleague, then approached the Millers again. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave this property," he said firmly. "There's an active CPS investigation, and you have no legal right to contact Ellie at this time." Mr. Miller's face contorted with rage. "This isn't over," he spat, looking directly at me. "You've ruined everything. We'll make sure you regret it." The officers escorted the Millers off our property, warning them not to return. As they drove away, Ellie let out a shaky breath. "They're not going to give up," she said quietly. "They're losing a lot of money because of this." She was right. The Millers didn't give up easily. Over the next 2 months, they tried everything to discredit Ellie and me. They filed a complaint against me with my delivery company, claiming I'd been harassing them. They told neighbors and community members that Ellie was mentally unstable and making up stories. They even tried to contact my kids' school, though thankfully the administration didn't engage with them. But their efforts backfired. The more they lashed out, the more suspicious they looked to investigators, and Ellie's evidence was too solid to dismiss. Other former foster kids from the Miller home continued to come forward, each with similar stories of neglect and emotional abuse. Ms. Jordan kept us updated on the case. The investigation had expanded to include financial fraud. The Millers had apparently been misusing government funds meant for the children's care. They were facing serious charges, and their foster care license had been permanently revoked. As for Ellie, she was slowly healing. She started therapy with a counselor who specialized in trauma, this time without Mrs. Miller monitoring her sessions. She enrolled in the local elevated school and even made a few friends. There were still bad days, of course, nightmares, anxiety attacks, moments of deep sadness, but there were good days too, more and more of them as time went on. Our application to become Ellie's foster parents was progressing well. The home study was complete, and Ms. Jordan was advocating strongly for us. It wasn't a done deal yet, but things looked promising. One evening, about 4 months after Ellie had come to stay with us, we were all having dinner together when the doorbell rang. Karen went to answer it while the rest of us continued eating. She came back looking confused, holding a large envelope. "It's for you," she said, handing it to me. hand-delivered by some guy in a suit. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of legal papers. As I read the first page, my stomach dropped. The Millers were suing me for defamation, harassment, and alienation of affection regarding Ellie. They were demanding an enormous sum in damages. "What is it?" Ellie asked, noticing my expression. I tried to downplay it, not wanting to worry her. "Just some legal stuff from the Millers, nothing to worry about." But Ellie wasn't a child who could be easily reassured. "They're suing you, aren't they?" she asked directly. "Because of me." I sighed and nodded. "It's just a tactic to try to scare us. Their case doesn't have any merit. But you'll have to hire a lawyer, right? That costs money." Ellie looked devastated. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to cause all this trouble for your family." Karen reached across the table and took Ellie's hand. "You haven't caused trouble, Ellie. The Millers are the ones doing that, and we're not scared of them." I tried to project confidence, but truthfully, I was worried. We didn't have the kind of money needed for a prolonged legal battle. The Millers, despite the ongoing investigations, still had resources and connections. This lawsuit could drain us financially, even if we eventually won. The next day, I called a lawyer friend for advice. He reviewed the lawsuit and confirmed what I suspected. It was mostly baseless, designed to intimidate rather than succeed in court. But fighting it would still be expensive and stressful. "The good news," he told me, "is that there's a strong case for having this dismissed early. The Millers are under investigation for the very things they're claiming you defamed them about. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation." He agreed to represent me at a reduced rate, understanding our situation. It was still going to be tight financially, but we'd manage. What mattered most was protecting Ellie and seeing this through. When I got home that evening, Ellie was waiting for me with a determined look on her face. "I want to testify against the Millers," she announced. "In court, in their lawsuit, wherever. I'm not afraid anymore." I was surprised by her resolve. "Are you sure? It could be really difficult, facing them like that." She nodded firmly. "I'm sure. They think they can bully everyone into giving them what they want. They've been doing it for years. Someone needs to stand up to them, and I want it to be me." Her courage was humbling. This girl, who had been through so much, was willing to face her abusers to protect us, the family that had taken her in. I felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. Ellie had already endured more than any kid should have to. I didn't want her to suffer more because of this lawsuit, but I also understood her need to take back some control, to fight rather than hide. So I nodded and told her we'd talk to the lawyer about it. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. The next few weeks were a total blur of lawyer meetings and paperwork. Our lawyer, Thomas, was pretty great about explaining everything in normal people terms instead of legal gibberish. He filed a motion to dismiss the Millers' lawsuit, arguing it was just retaliation for the CPS investigation. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation against the Millers was picking up steam. The financial fraud stuff was looking serious. Apparently, they'd been pocketing thousands of dollars meant for the kids' care. Ellie was still determined to testify. Thomas helped prepare her, explaining what kinds of questions she might face and how to answer them. I was worried about her having to relive all that trauma, but she seemed stronger each day. The therapy was definitely helping. She'd started calling her therapist the brain mechanic, which made us all laugh. One night, I found Ellie sitting on our back porch, staring at the stars. I sat down next to her, not saying anything at first. We just existed in the quiet together for a while. "You know what's weird?" she finally said. "If you hadn't looked up that day, I wouldn't be here. But also, the other kids might still be with the Millers." I hadn't thought about it that way before. One random moment had changed so many lives. I told her I was glad I looked up, and she gave me a small smile. The court date for the motion to dismiss came faster than expected. Thomas seemed confident, but I was a nervous wreck the whole morning. Karen took the day off work to come with us for support. Ellie wasn't required to be there for this hearing, but she insisted on coming anyway. "I want to see their faces when they lose," she said, with a determination that surprised me. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble and echoes and people rushing around looking important. We met Thomas in the hallway outside the courtroom. He was wearing a suit that actually fit him, unlike the baggy one he wore at our meetings. "Ready?" he asked, and I nodded even though I definitely wasn't. Inside, the Millers were already seated with their lawyer, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit. Mrs. Miller glared at us as we walked in, but Mr. Miller wouldn't even look our way. They both looked more stressed than the last time I'd seen them. The investigation was clearly taking its toll. The judge, an older woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, called the court to order. The Millers' lawyer went first, painting this ridiculous picture of me as some obsessed delivery driver who'd inserted himself into their family and turned their foster daughter against them. He claimed I'd made false accusations that had damaged their reputation and business connections. When it was Thomas's turn, he calmly dismantled their entire argument. He presented evidence from the CPS investigation, including some of Ellie's photos and screenshots. He pointed out that the Millers were under criminal investigation for the very things they claimed I'd falsely accused them of. "Your Honor," Thomas said, "this lawsuit isn't about defamation. It's about intimidation. The plaintiffs are attempting to silence a whistleblower and punish a good Samaritan who saved a young girl's life and then refused to look the other way when he discovered abuse." The judge asked several questions, looking back and forth between the documents and the Millers. Their lawyer tried to argue that the CPS investigation was separate from their defamation claims, but he was clearly struggling. After about an hour of arguments, the judge removed her glasses and looked directly at the Millers. "I've heard enough," she said. This case appears to be a clear attempt at legal intimidation. The motion to dismiss is granted. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Karen squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, but I didn't mind. Ellie was sitting completely still, her eyes fixed on the Millers. The judge wasn't finished, though. Furthermore, she continued, I'm referring this matter to the Bar Association for review of potential ethical violations in bringing this suit, and I'm ordering the plaintiffs to pay the defendant's legal fees. The Millers' lawyer started to object, but the judge cut him off with a sharp look. As we left the courtroom, I felt like a massive weight had been lifted. The Millers brushed past us in the hallway, and Mr. Miller muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite hear, but his face said it all. They weren't done with us yet. Thomas was pleased with the outcome, but cautioned us that the Millers might try something else. People like that don't give up easily, he warned. Stay vigilant. He wasn't wrong. A few days later, Mrs. Miller showed up at my workplace. My supervisor called me to the front office, looking uncomfortable. When I got there, she was sitting in a chair, dressed like she was heading to a business meeting. Mr. Williams, she said with a fake smile, using my last name like we were old acquaintances. I was hoping we could talk privately. My supervisor raised his eyebrows at me, clearly wondering what was going on. I told him it was related to a legal matter and asked if we could use the conference room. He agreed, looking relieved to not be involved. Once we were alone, Mrs. Miller's smile vanished. This has gone far enough, she said coldly. You've made your point. I just stared at her, not sure what she was getting at. She opened her purse and pulled out an envelope. $20,000, she said, sliding it across the table. Cash. Take it, drop everything, and convince Ellie to recant her statements. Say she was confused, traumatized, whatever. Just make this go away. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was trying to bribe me to help them escape justice. I pushed the envelope back toward her without opening it. Not interested, I said, and you should leave before I call the police. Her face hardened. Don't be stupid. This investigation is going to drag on for months, maybe years. The stress will destroy your family. Ellie will have to relive everything over and over. Is that what you want for her? I stood up, done with the conversation. What I want is for you and your husband to face consequences for what you did to those kids. Now get out. She grabbed the envelope and stuffed it back in her purse. You'll regret this, she said as she left. We have friends in places you can't imagine. I reported the bribe attempt to both the police and Ms. Jordan immediately. They took it very seriously. Apparently attempting to bribe a witness is a pretty big deal. The detective I spoke with said it would definitely strengthen the case against the Millers. That night, I told Karen and Ellie what had happened. Karen was furious, but Ellie just nodded like she'd expected something like this. They tried to bribe some of the other kids before, she explained, when inspections were coming up. They'd give them candy or privileges if they said the right things. The next few days were tense. I kept expecting the Millers to try something else, but nothing happened. Then, about a week after the bribe attempt, Ms. Jordan called with news. The police had executed a search warrant on the Millers' financial records and found evidence of extensive fraud. They'd been arrested that morning. They were taking in kids from multiple counties and double billing the system, Ms. Jordan explained, plus skimming money that was supposed to go toward the children's care. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars over several years. I felt a mix of relief and vindication. The Millers were finally facing real consequences. When I told Ellie, she got very quiet, then asked if she could call some of the younger kids who'd been in the home with her. She was worried about how they were handling the news. Ms. Jordan arranged for Ellie to talk to a few of them. Hearing her reassure these younger kids, telling them it wasn't their fault and things would get better, was incredible. She'd been through so much herself, but she was still focused on protecting others. Our application to become Ellie's foster parents was finally approved a few weeks later. We had a small celebration dinner, just our family. Ellie seemed happier than I'd ever seen her, though she admitted she was scared to get too comfortable in case something went wrong again. Nothing's going to go wrong, Karen assured her. You're stuck with us now. The preliminary hearing for the Millers' criminal case was scheduled for the following month. Ellie would need to testify, along with several other former foster kids. She was nervous, but determined. We helped her prepare as best we could, and her therapist worked with her on coping strategies for the stress. The day before the hearing, Ellie came to me with a notebook in her hand. I wrote something, she said shyly, for tomorrow. Can I read it to you? I nodded, and she opened the notebook. It was a statement she wanted to make to the court, explaining not just what the Millers had done, but how it had affected her and the other kids. It was straightforward and powerful, without any self-pity, just the truth. That's really good, Ellie, I told her when she finished. The judge needs to hear that. She smiled, looking relieved. I want to do this right, not just for me, but for all the other kids they hurt. The hearing itself was intense. The courtroom was more crowded than for our dismissal motion, with reporters and what looked like other foster parents in attendance. The Millers were there in orange jumpsuits, looking much less intimidating than before. Ellie was called to testify early in the proceedings. She walked to the witness stand with her head held elevated. The prosecutor asked her questions about her time with the Millers, and she answered clearly and calmly. When asked about her sewer slide attempt, she glanced at me briefly before explaining how hopeless she had felt. The Millers' defense attorney tried to paint her as unstable and unreliable, suggesting she had made up the abuse allegations for attention. But Ellie didn't take the bait. She stuck to the facts and even corrected him when he tried to twist her words. When given the chance to make her prepared statement, Ellie spoke directly to the judge. Her voice shook a little at first, but grew stronger as she continued. She explained how the Millers' abuse had affected not just her physical well-being, but her sense of self-worth and trust in adults. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the punishments, she said. It was knowing that the people who were supposed to protect us saw us as nothing but paychecks. That does something to you that's hard to fix. By the time she finished, several people people in the courtroom were wiping away tears. Even the judge looked moved. The Millers, however, showed no reaction at all. After Ellie's testimony, several other former foster kids spoke. Their stories matched Ellie's: consistent patterns of neglect, emotional abuse, and financial exploitation. The prosecutor also presented financial evidence showing how the Millers had misused funds meant for the children's care. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled there was more than enough evidence to proceed to trial. The Millers were denied bail due to the severity of the charges and the risk they might try to influence witnesses. As we left the courthouse, a reporter approached us, asking for a statement. I was about to decline when Ellie stepped forward. "The Millers hurt a lot of kids," she said simply. "I just want to make sure they can't do it anymore." The reporter asked a follow-up question, but I gently steered Ellie away. She'd done enough for one day. That night, we had a quiet dinner at home. Ellie seemed exhausted, but at peace. After the kids went to bed, she sat with Karen and me in the living room. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for everything, for looking up that day, for not giving up. We're the ones who should be thanking you," I told her. "You're the bravest person I know." She shook her head. "I'm not brave. I was just tired of being scared all the time." 6 months later, the Millers' trial concluded with guilty verdicts on multiple counts of fraud, child endangerment, and abuse. They received substantial prison sentences and were ordered to pay restitution to all the children who had been in their care. The day the verdict was announced, Ellie got accepted to her top-choice college with a partial scholarship. She'd been working incredibly hard at school, making up for lost time. The acceptance letter came in the mail, and she ran into the house waving it like a flag. "I got in!" she shouted, and we all celebrated with ice cream and a movie night. Later, when everyone else was asleep, I found Ellie sitting on the porch again, looking at the stars like she had that night months ago. "Penny, for your thoughts?" I asked, sitting beside her. She smiled. "I was just thinking about how different everything is now. A year ago, I didn't think I'd live to see 18. Now I'm going to college." I nodded, remembering that day when I looked up and saw her through the window. One small moment that changed everything. "I'm really proud of you," I told her. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I'm proud of us," she said. "All of us." And sitting there under the stars with my daughter, because that's who she was now, paperwork or not, I couldn't help but agree.